An Anthony Fantano story by Jake R. Holy shit, said Anthony Fantano, angry that his fifth fucking thread he posted on MU got 404'd. Why the fuck can't these nerds get it through their thick head that I'm amazing? Fandango punching a hole through the monitor. The sheer force of the blow was so powerful it sent shockwaves through Anthony's house. His good buddy Cal Chichesta came through the door with a kick in his step and a cheer in his heart. With the voice of an angel and sincere worry for his best friend, Cal melodically transmits a "How's it going, Anthony?" Before he could finish his sentence, Anthony ripped off Cal's sweater, grabbed him by the nipples, and catapulted him through the broken mirror with the force of 1,000 Zach Hills. Being the cherub that Cal is, he simply gave this a trademark thumbs up, removed his head from the screen, and walked away. Fucking Christ, said the melon, still mad that his only source of advertisement had been revoked from him. He decides the best course of action is to lead a double life as Xavier Bush Destroyer. As Bush Destroyer, he roams the streets at night, planting heroin copies of the Velvet Underground and Nico records in children's bedrooms. This is completely irrelevant to the actual story and is only put here for unneeded context. Getting furious that his entire life is fucking destroyed, in all caps, he grows bored. B-O-A-R-D. In this state of boredom, he puts on White House's Birdseed LP that he got from his main man, Violent J, from the Insane Clown Posse, and lets the beauty of the record flow through his eardrums. Realizing that the title track is a 15-minute long spoken word, he takes the record and throws it out the window. A cat's screech can be heard from the distance. I could just listen to Buyer's Market if I wanted to hear this trash, screamed Anthony. He then gets a telegraph message because Anthony is a hipster fucking scumbag, and the only way he can communicate with people is by using outdated bullshit because it's trendy. Melonhead Supreme III waltzes over to the telegraph and gets a message from none other than Michael Gira. He said that he has stolen his water jar and that if he wants it back, he better return Birdseed back to Gira before he smashes his jar with a hammer. Anthony foolishly plays it off as a joke because he clearly got it from Violent J. With an unquenchable thirst, mighty Mr. A goes into the kitchen to fetch his jar. Walking to the kitchen with his bitch fucking face, Antoine encounters a Mr. Chichesta minding his own fucking business. With an anger that could scare the gods, Anthony grabbed the spray bottle he kept in the corner and sprayed Cal Chichesta, bellowing, "Get you bitch ass back in the whack Cal zone." Cal scurried away from the melon, crying the tears of an innocent virgin. Even thirstier after enacting this tyranny, he reaches for his water jar, realizing that his only source of hydration is no longer available. Antoine cried bitch tears at the thought of dehydration. After he got done crying, he spouted out, "Gira, you son of a bitch, that LP was a gift from the Insane Clown Posse." But before he could bother with his hankering of water, he needed to listen to Jenny Death because it dropped, and it's fucking Jenny Death for fuck's sake. I'm listening to it while writing this shitty story. Why the fuck are you not listening to it? Strong 10, said Fanthony. Even better than covering his mouth because he had almost said the forbidden word. He then realized what he had almost done. He got about 46 telegrams from many upstanding African Americans giving him permission to say it. These African Americans included RZA, Earl Sweatshirt, Mike Seatown, his fucking girlfriend, Vernon Reed, for some reason Eminem and LP, with a blind illusion that they are black, also responded giving him permission to say that word that I am not going to repeat because I know Fantano will not pick my fanfic if it says it. Getting off the topic at hand, he decided to meet Gira in person. Unfortunately, his path was blocked by a bunch of Odd Future punks holding signs that said 10 out of 10, review it again, demanding that Anthony gives Goblin a proper score. With the speed of a bullet train, Fantano grabs his grandpa's Winchester rifle and fires some shots in the air. Afraid of any actual violence, the Odd Future douchebags run away like a bunch of pansies, dropping the rifle, he makes his way through the city. Thirsty as all hell, he encounters a kiosk that sells bottles of water for a nickel. Being the spoiled rich kid all hipster scum are, he obviously has the money to buy some fucking water. But being the spoiled rich kid all hipster scum are, he tells the kiosk clerk to fuck off and that he will only drink out of his jar. He gets to Jira's base of operations. Guarding it was none other than the ghost of Gigi Allen. Throwing ghost shits around like crazy, Anthony runs from the ghost because he can't get shit that isn't fucking real on his new Sun shirt. I mean, really, Fantano? Running from ghost Gigi Allen? He's a fucking ghost and his shits aren't real. Deal with it, you wussy. In his ivory tower, Jira sticks his head out. Where is my Birdseed album I lent you? Questioned Jira. Up your ass, old man. That was a gift from the wicked clown, said Fantano. Jira rebutted with, you know, Anthony, I'm not going to smash your bottle with a hammer. Anthony's face turned bright. Jira pulls out the jar. His bright face fell. Whoops, sarcastically said Jira, dropping the jar. As it cracked, Fantano went up to it, tears in his eye. With the only lick of sympathy he had in his bitch heart, he said to it, "You were always my best friend." As that last sentence was uttered, Fantano fell to the ground. Dehydrated, his body turned into a skeleton like on Dragon's Quest. This was a happy day indeed, as Cal was finally free of the clutches of the evil melon. Death Grips no longer has to deal with Fantano sending death threats to Flatlander because he's making a move on his man MC Ride, and clipping still sucks dick. Anthony and the Closet by Stuart C. Anthony Fantano, the internet's busiest music nerd, had run out of things to do. Dishes done, laundry on, choice EPs reviewed, melonade brewed. He snuck deep into his pristine velvet couch and immersed himself in the undiluted peace of a successful day. Warm fingers of afternoon sunlight peered through his blinds in beams of gold, tickling the well-dusted air, illuminating the mahogany encasing now silent vinyl. Oddly, Anthony's apartment was absent of sound. He thought to himself, you could hear a needle drop. Eyes resting, Anthony takes a sip from a condensation-adorned mason jar, filled to the brim with sweet, refreshing ambrosia. The cold comfort of the melonade contrasted tangly with Anthony's warm, supple body, and a refreshed shiver quaked through him. The dust in the air rippled outwards from him. Nothing else in his tomb quiet room stirred the tiniest bit, apart from the playful bubbles in his hands. A flicker of sensuous mischief is born in Anthony's mind. So many an intimate evening, but rarely an intimate moment with himself, lust drove its fangs deep into his tranquil moment, transforming his relaxed mood into an insatiable hunger for carnal pleasure. Unfortunately for him, his girlfriend was out working in the melon fields, and so his impassioned wails of desire would not lure her into his crypt-like boudoir. Tossing, turning, writhing, palace was now prison. His sweet sanctum of sound, now a blue balls gulag. Even his iPod taunted him. War on Drugs, Suck My Cock was the last song he listened to during a grueling bicep sesh. Now, the very idea of the war on drugs sucking his cock was a taunting reminder of the sheer lack of indie pop fellatio in his life at this very moment. The internet's busiest music nerd remained this way, transfixed for a time, his muscled arms reaching out begging for relief from the prison of his longings, but his ceiling provided no solace. Much like his month-long stint in a cartel-run wrestling arena, Anthony Luchardo gained from this nothing, only lost a good ordeal of mass through sweat that could have been converted into sweet gains. Anthony released a defeated sigh. His manhood was sinking faster than the public's interest in the music of Tyler, the Creator. And with its desire... sinking faster than the public's interest in the music of Tyler, the Creator, and with it his desire to get his freak on. In its wake left a different kind of silence than the one left before. This was not a quiet satisfaction, but one of disappointment. Anthony craved something to occupy his thoughts once more. He longed to be busy again. While logging onto his computer, Anthony heard a creak from behind him. Odd, he thought. He knew that it couldn't be his girlfriend, and Cal was currently in California working as Bones' hype man. As this thought passed through his mind, creak again. He worked hard to ignore it, updating his Twitter furiously with musings. Is it just me, or do the mountain goats sound oddly similar to the front bottoms? What is a front bottom anyway? Is it possible to cultivate a front bottom at the gym? Will my front bottom make angsty music, or will mine be more serene? Creak. He could ignore it no longer. Anthony quickly stopped attempting to fold his cock and balls into a front bottom and sprung cat-like from his computer chair, seeking the creak. His explosive, courageous action obviously frightened whatever the creaker was, and he heard a panicked rustle, from his closet as whatever or whoever it was struggled to helplessly make itself quiet. Anthony strode confidently up to it before flinging open its doors like an emperor making his entrance to the Colosseum. What lay within it shook Anthony to his very core. I didn't know you wrote music in closets that aren't haunted, Anthony whispered, not believing what he was seeing. Among the animal-faced t-shirts, he sat there, singing saw in hand with a glazed look on his face as marijuana smoke rolled out of his gaping mouth. I thought you were half awake and drifting off to sleep, Jeff Mangum coughed, pink eyes peering out towards the quivering, awestruck frame of the internet's busiest music nerd. Tears filled Anthony's eyes, partially from the harsh chronic wafting out into his face, but mainly from the heavy memories of sunny afternoons spent with Jeff amongst the willows along the rivers of Connecticut, the picnic blanket, the sound of water, Jeff's strong arms holding him as the world lived around them, and comfort found only when one heart has found another match so eternally to theirs. Anthony turned away. Leave me alone, he said. You know this isn't the first time. Jeff seemed hurt. I'll never forget you, Anthony. My mind plays over and over again when my semen stained your mountaintops. And surely that proves our love must still exist. Old sorrow reignited within Anthony. He could not forget the deep pain he felt when Jeff disappeared without warning at Bonnaroo. The pain that transformed a bright-eyed boy into a man who filled his time with musical busywork to forget the open wound of abandonment Jeff had left emblazoned upon his chest. Silence formed a wall between them both. The only sound in the room was the tick-tock of the No Love Deep Web album alarm clock on Anthony's nightstand. The two shared each other's company for a moment, both drunk on the nostalgia that was tearing them both apart. Broken, Anthony reached for the handle of Jeff's closet, meaning to close it and then leave it outside Scott Spillane's house. But Jeff reached out. Jeff took Anthony's hand into his own. Jeff whispered, "The only internet music nerd I ever loved was born with melanade in his mason jar." Anthony Fantano, Jeff Mangum, poorly written fan fiction, forever. Anthony Noir by Christopher D. Anthony Fantano sat at his desk and took a long drag from his cigarette. A bead of sweat traced its way down his chin. It was hot in his office, a little too hot. The flickering beams of a streetlight made their way through the slats of the closed blinds, making a trail through the smoke that filled the room. Fantano muffed out his cigarette in the ashtray sitting on his desk. It had been a while since a job had come his way. Fantano reached for his mason jar, filled to the brim with freshly made melonade, and was about to take a sip when suddenly the door slammed open. A dim light filled the smoky room, and filling the doorway, Fantano saw the outline of a dame unlike any other he had seen before. She had hips that could make the Pope's loins stir, long blonde hair, and a mustache unlike any other Fantano had seen before. "The name is Kalida, but you can call me Cal, sugar," the dame said. "What brings a gal like you to these parts?" said Fantano. "I heard you're the internet's busiest music nerd, aren't you?" "Some people would say so." Well, I have a case for you, sugar. Cal stepped into the room, followed by a hazy aura of perfume. Fantano put his mason jar down and leaned back into his chair. Cal walked up to Fantano's desk in the sort of way that could make any man weak in the knees and said, I have an album that needs reviewing. Fantano eyed her suspiciously. It's a tape, actually. All lights fucked on the hairy amp drooling, they call it. Now say, where did a gal like you find a tape like that? You see, I don't. That's what I need you for. I know who has it. Cal took a seat on Fantano's desk and pulled out a cigarette. You mind if I smoke, sugar? Fantano shot a look at her. Good, sugar. So here's the scoop. A man named Piero Scaruffi has it hidden away where nobody will ever find it. Cal lit the cigarette and took a drag. And where might that be? A place where nobody would ever suspect to look. Cal blew out a puff of smoke and hopped down off the desk. She began to walk towards the door and turned back to Fantano and said seductively, You be careful now. I wouldn't want you getting hurt. Fantano knew Fantano knew this Scaruffi character very well. After all, Fantano was the internet's busiest music nerd. He had seen the interior of his house before, but how to break in. Fantano sat in the dark, hazy office, the last notes of Cal's perfume lingering in the smoky air. He needed this job. His 7 children were counting on him. Suddenly, he understood exactly what he had to do. He picked up the phone on his desk and flipped through his Rolodex to Scaruffi's number. He punched the number into the receiver and listened as the line rang. After what seemed like an eternity, he picked up. Hey, Piero. You want to listen to the new Swans album at your place? Huh? Who is this? He said, with his voice still raspy from sleep. Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd. Oh, hi, it's 3 in the goddamn AM, Anthony. What is this about? How would you like to listen to the new Swans album together at your place? I guess, but only to further the plot. Good, I'll see you in 10. Anthony slammed the phone onto the receiver and celebrated in a silent victory to himself. He walked across the office, threw on his trench coat, grabbed his copy of To Be Kind, and headed out into the night. It was almost 4 a.m. by the time Fantano reached Scaruffi's place, and pouring rain. Fantano stepped out of his car and walked through his door. His house was a humble house, with a welcome mat and a Christmas wreath, even though it was August. Fantano rang the doorbell, and a couple seconds later, Scaruffi answered the door. He had on a large smile despite how tired he was, but Anthony could see right through that. He knew what Scaruffi was up to. Hey, Anthony, long time no see. The place is a mess. I wasn't quite expecting anyone tonight. Scaruffi had guided Fantano in. Fantano could see through his lies and false courtesies. The room was immaculate. Fantano pulled out the Swans album from under his trench coat. So, where do you want to listen to this? Follow me upstairs. That's where I keep my turntable. Fantano followed him up the stairs cautiously. They walked into a large room with walls and walls of records. Fantano knew he could never find the tape in here with Scaruffi watching over him. You know, Piero, I sure am thirsty. From all that driving to get over here. Can you bring me a drink? Sure, what would you like? Melonade. I'll see what I can find for you. Scaruffi left the room, and Fantano went to work looking for the tape. He found a large box of old tapes and started to dig through it, but to no avail. In frustration, he kicked the box, and a beetle skittered out from under it. At that moment, Scaruffi came back into the room. What is the ruckus in here? Scaruffi said. I think you have a beetle problem. Scaruffi stared at Fantano with anger and started... At the fact that so many books still name the Beatles the greatest or most significant or most influential rock band ever, ... Then all of a sudden it hit Fantano, a place where nobody would look. Fantano made his way to the wall and looked under the letter B. There it was, sandwiched between 2 Beatles records, all lights fucked on the hairy amp drooling. Strong Ted, Fantano said quietly to himself. Cal Chuchesta Origins by Sam D. A gut-wrenching scream echoed through the near-abandoned hallways of the maternity ward. It was 3:24 a.m. and Anthony Fantano, the internet's busiest music nerd, had just entered his 5th hour of labor. It was Dr. MC Ride's first day on the job, and he hadn't slept in 30 hours. He was growing tired of Anthony's moans and screams. However, he knew deep inside that he must persevere. He arrived at the door of Fantano's private room and took a deep breath. He was about to deliver the bad news, the worst part of the job, so he was told. Though the news wasn't entirely grim. MC Ride was just worried about his lack of any proper medical training. He had, however, seen footage of the procedure he was about to perform. Unfortunately, he insisted to his new colleagues that he had, in fact, remained paranoid about it. He slowly pushed open the door to reveal his assistant nurse, Jeff Mangum, tending to a very red-faced and sweaty and distressed Fantano. After he had made himself apparent and gained their attention, Dr. Ride finally imparted the news. It was going to be a more complicated procedure than we had once thought. The pair shared a brief moment in silence as they stared blankly at Ride. Waiting for him to explain what he meant, the x-rays have come back, and we are shocked to say the least, he continued. Let me ask, Mr. Fantano, were the circumstances that led you to becoming pregnant peculiar? The question Anthony dreaded most. He wished he could answer, but it was difficult to pinpoint exactly where or when it had happened. The last year had been a blur for Anthony, from tirelessly looking after the 7 kids he had already had, to his favorite experimental hip-hop outfit calling it quits, to being stranded in the harsh Australian deserts for a week or so. He was ashamed to admit that he had found himself drinking more. His morning jar of fruit smoothie had turned into a morning jar of fruit smoothie with tequila, and the repercussions were now rearing their head. Between gasps, he uttered, "I don't know." Dr. Ride nodded, and that was the answer he expected. This was no everyday pregnancy, as far as he knew. He finally decided to be transparent about the situation. "Mr. Fantano, you have a big baby." There was a brief pause for Dr. Ride to examine the perplexed faces of Anthony and Jeff. "Hella big. So big, we don't even know how it fits in your womb. We're going to have to perform a C-section." Jeff knew exactly what to do. He shuffled out of the room to go get supplies in the cabinet and retrieve the surgical tools required for the procedure. He returned quickly, carrying a single scalpel, as well as an old tape deck and a nylon string acoustic guitar that had frankly seen much better days. Before Ride could inquire as to what the fuck Jeff thought he was doing, the heavily bearded Christmas sweater-wearing assistant nurse interrupted. "You guys got to check out my new mixtape." Since Dr. Ride knew no better about hospital practices, he was all too happy for Jeff to plug in the tape deck. He always worked better to music anyway. Jeff inserted the tape and spent a couple of minutes fast-forwarding. "Are you ready?" he asked. He didn't wait for a response, though, nor did Dr. Ride. He already had the scalpel in his hand and was ready to work. 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, Jeff sang as he introduced the song Holland 1945. "The only girl I've ever loved was born with roses in her eyes." He continued singing as Dr. Ride snipped away at Anthony Fantano's violently swollen uterine walls. The song had worked wonders and brought the procedure some serious momentum. "Aw shit, I'm feeling it," exclaimed Dr. Ride excitedly. He was now able to lift the gargantuan infantile abomination from Fantano's wretched womb. Holland 1945 had stopped playing, and the tape had moved on to the next song, Communist Daughter, a much slower and mellow track which fit perfectly with the relief the three were now feeling. Dr. Ride handed Fantano his newborn child as Jeff sung solemnly in the background. "Semen stains the mountaintops, semen stains the mountaintops." Thankful the entire ordeal was over, Dr. Ride inquired about the name of the child. "He will be named Calchester," replied. "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry," replied a very relieved Anthony. The song was wrapping up with some horns that sounded like fanfare. Dr. Ride and his trusty assistant nurse turned to leave. Before he shut the door behind him, Jeff imparted one final piece of wisdom. "Be sure to feed him tomatoes and radio wire." Anthony Fantano, the internet's busiest music nerd, smiled and nodded reassuringly before lowering his shirt and allowing his newborn son to feed for the first time. God. Cal gets kicked out by Sean B. One day, Anthony Fantano of The Needle Drop was listening intently to his vinyl copy of Ice Age's Plowing into the Field of Love when he heard the chilling sounds of children laughing and Cachuchesta attempting to be humorous. Anthony sprang up from his seat, put his vegan cigarette out on his tongue, which was really just a celery stick on fire, and screamed, "Chuchesta!" He ran into the other room to see Cal was carrying several of Anthony's 7 children on his back, including Michael, Miguel, Mickey, Edwin, and Anthony Jr., his oldest daughter. Michelle, with 2 L's, Michelle with 1 L, and Michael Jr., and Travis were all standing about, laughing and making merry times. Anthony yells, "Calbert Chuchestman, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Cal replies, "Just playing with some of your kids, Anthony." Anthony shook his head. No. You have no right. These are my kids. I have raised them from birth. You know nothing about my kids." Cal responds, But Anthony interrupts and says, "No. You know what, Cal? You've been living here for over 5 years now. I think it's time you move out. It's actually kind of insane that you moved in with me when I moved to this apartment in 2012. I just opened up one of the boxes and you were in there." Cal puts Anthony's kids down and puts on a visage of utter melancholy. Cal shakes his head, and Anthony's 7 children, plus the kids that Anthony disowned, all let out in awe. As Cal picks up his only worldly possessions, 4 pairs of the same sweater, and a vinyl copy of Matchbox 20's B-Sides and Rarities. As Cal was about to leave, Anthony said, "Hey." Cal turned around with hope in his eyes. "Don't forget this." Anthony threw a piece of paper reading "Whack Calzone" at Cal, and it danced about the air for an unusually long time before landing at Cal's feet. Cal picks it up and goes on his way. Several hours later, Cal found himself at a bar in New Haven, attempting to drown his sorrows in Blue Moon. Suddenly, his half-crossed eyes were scanning the bar. He saw a familiar face. It was intern Chris. "Chris," Cal said while removing his mustache for dramatic effect. Chris walks over to Cal. "Hi, Cal," Chris responds. "Listen there, bud. I got a problem. I could use your help," Cal confides. "Anthony kicked me out." Chris sneers and says, "Of course he did. He's a lying, backstabbing, no-goodin' son of a bitch with a federally protected blonde forest reserve on his head." "Actually, he shaved that off a few months back," Cal points out. "Oh, he did? Okay, I stopped watching after he gave Salad Days a 5. Cal nods his head. "Is that why you hate him now? Because he gave Salad Days a 5? Cal inquires. "No, it's mostly because he owes me money. I did a ton of appearances on his channel, and he said he'd pay me. He always ends up blowing that money on Dead Kennedy 7 inches and bids to spend one night alone with Neil Cicerega." Cal sips his drink and says, "So we both have reason to be mad at him. How are we going to get our revenge?" Chris rests his elbow on the bar to think, but then a bartender says, "Hey," and then Chris quickly lifted his elbow from the bar. "Sorry," Chris said. Later, Cal and Chris were in Chris's garage. "Okay, here's what we must do." Anthony reviews a lot of music, right? He owns a lot of vinyl and a ton of CDs and digital copies of albums. So here's something. How does he afford that junk on a YouTuber's salary? If we can prove that he's torrenting music online, we can present the evidence to Governor Malloy or Attorney General Jepsen, and it would be a huge scandal for Fantano. The Needle Drop would fold like origami forever. Later that night, Cal is parked across the street from Anthony's house, watching over it closely with a pair of binoculars. Chris is sitting in the back seat. "Any movement yet?" Chris asks. "No, not yet. He's got to leave the house sometime, right?" Cal wonders. "I know how to get him out of there," Chris says. "How?" Cal asks. "I need to make him angry. When he gets angry, he goes on drives to clear his mind. And the best way to get him angry is by introducing him to a meme rapper." Chris opens his laptop. Under another name, I'll send him a link to a single by this rapper named Pop Spiders, who has a mixtape dropping in 2025. Cal asks, "Why 11 years? Chris responds, "To build up the hype, I guess. Anyway, this guy first got famous because he broke into someone's house during a filming of MTV Cribs and pretended it was his own. And now on this new track of his, he has some bars that are bound to have Anthony's blood boiling, like..." Meanwhile, Anthony is angrily reading Pop Spider's bar on Rap rap genius. Ayo, pop spiders in the mother shizzin' place. You can guess my mother shizzin' race? I'm black, yeah. I got a mouthful of hater juice. I spit it out, replace it with gin and juice. Remember, kids, never hate the Jews. Forgive them for killing Christ, they're unstoppable. What the hell is this? I've got cars full of money and haters full of cash. I've got hoes full of coins and sluts full of ass. No, I'm done, says Anthony. I can't handle this. He gets up and leaves his house. He gets into his car, slams the door, and drives off as Chris and Cal look in excitement. They sneak into Anthony's house through his unlocked front door and sneak steadily into his office. Do you know his password? He never let me near his computer, Cal pointed out. Of course I know his password. I spent so much time here as a teenager that Fantano is on more than his fair share of federally published lists. Chris said as he punched in the password. Cal and Chris collected the evidence they needed and went on their way. Several months later, Anthony Fantano, Cal Chuchesta, and Chris Capello were standing before an Allen County judge. He pounded the gavel with the utmost intensity. Mr. Chuchesta and Mr. Capello, you are hereby charged with breaking and entering and theft. How do you plead? The judge asks through his cloak, most deep and distinguished. We plead not guilty, Your Honor, Chris says, exasperated. Anthony's slick lawyer stands up and says, Your Honor, these two broke into my client's home and the evidence proves that. Let's help this nice jury get home, huh? An extremely bored jury sat in the room as flies buzzed around them every which way. Cal speaks up and says, Anthony was torrenting sangs. We were looking for justice, which causes the jury to gasp, and everyone looks over to them to see they once again look uninterested. See, even immediately after gasping, they look bored. Let's render this verdict. It doesn't matter what Mr. Fantano was doing. It's not admissible in the court anyway. The lawyer posits. I agree. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asks. A juror stands up and reads the verdict. We, the jury, hereby find the defendants Calvin Chuchesta and Chris Capello guilty on all counts. The judge faces a very broken down Cal and Chris. I hereby sentence you to serve time at the New Haven Niantic Annex forever, he says, while winking at Anthony Fantano. Chris yells, You're sending us to prison forever just because you wanted to nod to Anthony's catchphrase? The judge yells, Order! And yes. With that, Cal and Chris were hauled off to prison for the rest of their lives. Anthony occasionally visited Cal in prison, but he refused to speak to Chris. I just can't go there emotionally, Anthony said when asked by himself in the mirror. Cal's Clone Conquest by Aaron S. And that's it. Anthony Fantano here, insert artist here, forever. Anthony breathed a sigh of relief as he leaned back against the wall. Another review done, out of the way. Finally, he could return to his usual life without needing to bother with any of the hassle or deadlines for reviews. He can crawl back into bed and, hey, Cal freaking Chesta. What do you want? Said Anthony, in a way that made it perfectly clear that he didn't care what the reason was anyway. I, found something that's really cool, and it's been written about you and about me, and it's about all the guys who do the show, and it's a fiction from a fan. Anthony Fantano curled up into a ball in the corner, letting out a long, drawn-out sigh. Just go. But Anthony, it's the fiction-y fan stuffs. You're always talking about how you're about the fans and the musics and the... Cal's words were cut short by a vase shattering into 1,000 pieces about a foot to the left of his head, as small fragments of porcelain tinkled and formed dust plumes on the floor. Cal quickly dashed out of the room, taking the hint. As Anthony rose again to his full height, cricked his neck, and turned to browse his vinyl collection. Cal closed the door to Anthony's room, still taken aback by the sudden showing of anger Anthony had put on. I guess that means he doesn't want to read the fanfic then, Cal Chuchesta said to himself, turning away from the room in disappointment, heading towards a downstairs laptop with the fanfiction on its screen. Cal had spent so long typing up this fanfiction for Anthony, as well as trying to prove to Anthony that Cal was all along his biggest fan. Cal's eyes suddenly went from disappointment to shock and then rage. In one quick motion, he'd finally figured out a way to prove it to Anthony. Years of being the underdog were finally about to pay off. A huge boom shook the Fantano household, with the glass rattling in its panes and some of Anthony's records falling off their shelves. He was shocked by this, but only slightly though, as he motioned to pick his records up before another boom floored them. He glanced up through his window in a blurry daze. He could barely make out that standing before his house, with a massive plume of hellfire and brimstone surrounding them, was an entire army of Cal Chuchestas. Oh, come the fuck on. Anthony Fantano quickly dashed outside, a vinyl copy of Death Grips still in his clutches. The situation was far worse than he had originally thought. Thousands and thousands of Chuchestas, all lined up in army rankings, with one singular cardigan-wearing bastard controlling them all. A small growl of disdain slipped its way through Fantano's lips as he went back inside in an attempt to ignore Cal's efforts of world domination. Sifting through his vinyl records and leaving the world behind to enter a stage of deep thought, Fantano came across something that he thought he'd never owned. Rebecca Black Friday? There was only one thing that could be done to such a monstrosity. Anthony quickly ran downstairs into the cellar, flicking the light on. Before him on a golden pedestal stood the only weapon that could be used to destroy bad music, the almighty hammer of justice. He quickly snatched the almighty hammer of justice and, copy of Friday in hand, dashed upstairs and booted open the front door to his house. The Chuchesta conquest was still ongoing, now tens of thousands amassing in the streets and houses around him. But Anthony knew exactly what to do. He held the copy of Friday aloft in an attempt to get all the Chuchestas to notice him. They all darted around to face Fantano, attracted by the beautiful musics the CD contained. Anthony then threw the CD on the ground, its paper insert and the album case strewing the sidewalk. All the cows quickly dashed for Fantano in a blind rage after disgracing their favorite artist, but it was too late. Fantano had already struck the CD with the almighty hammer of justice, releasing the unholy demons that occupied the CD from within. Behind Fantano, a demonic portal to hell opened, and with the force of a black hole proceeded to suck every clone of Cal Chuchesta into it. Anthony struggled hard against the immense suction of the portal as thousands of Chuchestas streamed past him, all of them screaming as they fell into the abyss. Eventually, Anthony closed the portal. He let out a sigh of relief and went back into his house, completely unfazed by the events that occurred. He sat down by his record player, and just before he put his copy of Death Grips on, he heard a voice in the distance. What even was that? Cal survived? Oh, that was just me stopping you from creating a massive clone army of Cal Chuchestas in a vain attempt to overthrow the universe. It's nothing special, happens about once a month. But why didn't you keep the portal open long enough to suck me in? Did you really save me? Do you really care for me, Anthony? Anthony let out a small laugh and motioned for Chuchesta to come give him a hug. But when they were locked in an embrace, Anthony continued speaking. No, I didn't. I still absolutely hate you. But Anthony, shh, no tears now. Anthony ran one finger down Chuchesta's cheek. As he tried to pull away from Fantano, Cal finally broke free of Fantano's grip and began to cry. Don't even, Anthony said, cutting short Chuchesta's cries. Oh, okay. And with that, they both proceeded with their daily lives as if nothing happened. Fantano would continue reviewing albums, and Chuchesta would continue quizzing a box of rocks to prove to the world that he is, in fact, smarter than them. And in the event that another world domination attempt is tried by Chuchesta, Anthony would always embrace his companion at the end of it, knowing full well that even though he's completely worthless, he'd be nothing without him. Cal Chuchesta's Existence Explained by Malik G. In this odd world, there is a man named Anthony Fantano. He never wore camo. Reviewed music, won't rant though. One day, Anthony was reviewing an album. He had never heard of the artist, so he didn't know the outcome. As he was writing a paper comprising his thoughts, he felt a weird sensation arising. What the fuck? Anthony yelled, with other explicits. He felt indifferent, as if something had shifted. His heart was on a downward slope. He felt he had choked. He passed out an hour later when he awoke. There stood a man and Anthony both in one room. Many thoughts went through their heads, I presume. "How you doin'?" the man said in a Canadian accent. "Who are you?" replied Anthony in resent. "Hey, I was going to ask you that," said the man. Well, I asked you first, so you answer. That's how it works. Understand? Oh, work. I used to work down by that Pizza Hut area. Girls would want to marry ya, you know? Anthony paused in confusion. No, I don't. I have no idea what that meant. Well, Anthony and this man spent a while trying to figure out who each other were. But the man was perverse and seemingly incapable of saying anything explainable. He eventually figured his name to be Cal, but everything else about him was untraceable. Anthony and his girl searched the entire world, but couldn't acquire a single thing about this guy. All they knew was most of his sentences were inaudible, and he looked similar to Anthony, who knows why. Well, in a moment of poor decision-making, Anthony decided to let Cal stay there since he had a room vacant. He had no idea what kind of problem he was creating. About a week went by and Anthony grew to despise Cal and his antics, comprised of pretty much anything you'd expect from a 4-year-old brother. He was getting in the way during reviews. Every time he speaks, you're confused. The naked Nicki Minaj posters in the garage. Sleep was never great because he is opening and closing cabinets 13 hours straight, and it just perpetually rose. So Anthony finally realized that he gotta go, but I have to do this proper. So he took him to the doctor, mostly in hopes to answer the question, who is this idiot? When the doctor's affiliates took a look, they were so shocked at his resemblance to Anthony, they were shook. To Anthony's distress when they took a DNA test, and when the results came in, this guy is Anthony's long-lost twin. It just got real, so the rhyming stops here, I guess. It can't be, Anthony told the doctor, and it doesn't explain why he just appeared in my room. The doctor looked shocked. What do you mean he appeared in your room? He questioned. What were you doing when this happened? He continued as he examined the blood samples in a tube. I was just reviewing an album, like always. Right after I finished, I felt sick and passed out. When I woke up, this guy was there. What were you reviewing? The new Lil B album. Why does that matter? The doctor's face turned blank. The room became so silent you could hear a needle drop to the ground. Breaking the silence, the doctor asked, "What did you rate the album?" "A 3 out of 10. It was pretty terrible," he replied. The doctor's face turned pale. "You reviewed a project done by the bass god and didn't give it a perfect score?" Before Anthony could reply, the doctor screamed sadistically and ran out of the room. Anthony stood in confusion. Cal stood with a stupid look on his face. "Hey, Anthony," said Cal, "that's kind of like a scene you would see at a movie, like Under Your Pillow, huh?" "Cal, that doesn't even make sense." "Well, yeah, I can't expect you to pay me each time I talk, you know." "That still, forget it. Let's just go." This got me nowhere. As they were driving home, Anthony heard a loud noise, almost like a tank's treads. Suddenly, an armored car turned the corner and started tailing him. A man on a mounted gun was on top. "What the hell is this?" yelled Anthony. He could hear the man say the words, "fake based detected." Freaking out, Anthony slammed down on the gas pedal. The armored car started shooting, completely destroying the back of his car. As Anthony looked around, armored cars and tanks were everywhere, just blowing shit up. Looked like he was in a video game like Battlefield or something. What in the world was happening, he thought. He eventually lost the car tailing them, but their car was pretty shot up. He got back to his apartment and barricaded the door. His girlfriend, who was waiting on them to come back, ran in and said, "What's going on?" "I don't know," replied Anthony. "I took Cal to the doctor and I told him what happened, and then he started freaking out, so we left. Then on the way home, the SWAT team or something just came after us. It was like a scene out of Born Uranium," said Cal. "Cal," Anthony said in a panic, "we are not in a good situation, so just for once, I need you to be serious. Can you do that?" "I too like serial numbers," replied Cal as he ran into the kitchen. "I'm really starting to hate that guy." As he said this, the men from earlier started banging on the door. "Fake base nearby. Task Force 47 apprehending." He could faintly hear them say, "They're breaking in. What do we do?" Anthony's girlfriend said. Anthony had nothing. Just as soon as they thought it was all over, MC Ride and Sir Michael Rocks burst through the ceiling and shot all the bitch mob task force members, thus saving Anthony and company. "You saved us," said Anthony. "But why?" "Oh, you know why," smiled and winked MC Ride. "I helped 'cause you fucked with Banco and gave me confidence to rap again," said Sir Michael, cutting off the awkward moment. "But the task force is still going to come after you. You got to cause another paradox to end this. And how do I do that?" "Why don't you review the new Limpin' Bizcutti album?" said Cal as he re-entered. "Cal, that is without a doubt the..." Cutting him off, "No," said Sir Michael. "If you do something like that, time never would thought you do like that. It'll cause a paradox big enough to rewind time and end this." "Okay, so what do I do?" "Just get in front of the camera and do your thing." Anthony set up his camera like usual, hit record, and said the words, "Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, and this is my review of the Limp Bizkit album." The second he said these words, everything froze and began rewinding. Anthony passed out again. When he woke up, everything was back to normal. He looked outside and it didn't look like the apocalypse. Anthony smiled, which quickly turned to a frown when he heard someone say, "You did it! You saved the world from bass! Now it's acid again!" Anthony turned in disbelief to see Cal standing there. "Why are you still here?" Anthony said. Suddenly he heard a voice saying, "You may have compensated for what you did to me, but don't think Bass God just gonna let you off. Stay rare and blessed, fam." Figaro. "Isn't this great, Anthony?" said Cal. Now you and me can be roommates forever." "So what should we review next? How about the mixtape Insanity by A-Man G?" Anthony passed out again. End. Lime Time by Michael B. Anthony is awake. Is he awake? What is awake? He sits beneath the branches of lime. The limes are certainly awake. Anthony is not. He gazes longingly and admiringly at the limes. What a pure life they must have, he thinks. How can he become more like the lime? He plucks a lime from its branch. The lime is now asleep. Anthony is startled. He now begins to think that perhaps the only time he is truly awake is in slumber. Slumber brings him lightness, not like the dull weight of consciousness dragging his body to the ground. He prays that he too can be like the lime. He wishes to be hung on the branch of enlightenment with his brethren. He knows not how to start, so he begins to peel the lime. Piece by piece, the inner gem is revealed. The naked fruit, now sitting in front of him, seems to glow pale yellow. He stares at the bare lime, and he hears a whisper, which fades away quickly. Anthony ignores it. The whisper sounded again, but this time it was audible. Anthony swears he heard, "Drop the fruit." He doesn't dare drop the precious glowing thing. It's too beautiful. He decides he must escape the phantom, so he begins to run toward the river 100 feet away. On his way, he tripped over a tree root, protruding from the ground. The lime falls out of his hand. As it hits the ground, it radiates with intense blue light. The light instantly sends Anthony into a state of intense comfort and peace. He is experiencing all that is pure in the world. In an instant, the light was gone, and so was the lime. He thought to himself, "I must experience this again." So he runs back to the vine from which the lime grew and plucked yet another. He quickly peeled it and dropped it into the soil. The lime bounced and rolled a few feet away without even a sparkle. Anthony wept with his hands over his face. He could not go another day without the pleasure he felt earlier. Seconds later, Anthony feels a hand on his back. He looks up, and it is Cal. Cal says, "It's about time I show you a thing or two." He leads Anthony into a small courtyard surrounded by trees bountiful with every fruit he knows, and some that he doesn't. Cal looks at Anthony lovingly, and Anthony falls to his knees and weeps. He begs Cal to tell him the secrets of the fruit. Cal calms Anthony and says to him, "All of us are fruit, just like the ones you see on the trees, and we are bound by branch of family. To achieve the feeling you had earlier, you must peel away your psychological defenses and be completely open to all experiences. Your existence should be a devotion to all of those that connect to you through branch, whether it be trunk or tiny twig. Make this your goal, and you shall be awakened like the lime. The Life and Times of Anthony Fantano by Daniel R. To tell the life story of Anthony Fantano, one must begin with an account of his critically acclaimed debut. The product of a one-time collaboration between Joni Mitchell and Lou Reed, his birth recorded on analog and reissued in 2009 via Jag-Jaguar, would achieve classic status among Portland natives within days of his release. Becoming an overnight sensation, Fantano's meteoric rise to stardom within the natal music scene more hindered his growth than nurtured it. Subsequent releases, such as Annie Learns to Tie His Shoegaze Influences, Noited at 9 Years, and the famous live album Fantano at Folsom Daycare, failed to achieve the same level of success. Reeling from a series of musical disappointments and a life-threatening Weird Al addiction, Anthony entered polka rehab at the early age of 11. During a meeting of Accordion Aficionados Anonymous, he would meet his longtime companion, Cal Cichesta, whose life had been hysterically devastated after the release of UHF. Unbeknownst to the majority of the public, Cal Cichesta was once not only Fantano's closest confidant, but also his rival. The two could often be found locked deep in conflict, testing each other's capacity to withstand emerging drone and noise acts. Their contention reached a bitter climax when Fantano dared Cichesta to sit through a Sun live set without earplugs. Though he barely survived after 16 intense hours in the operating room listening to soundtracks for the blind and heart work, Cal Cichesta's opinion glands were still devastatingly withered. After that day, Cal would never be able to conjure a single coherent thought relating to music. Struck with deep pangs of guilt, Fantano took Cichesta under his care and serves as his roommate and personal sweater designer to this day. Though his naive, nonsensical observations have become somewhat shrill and idiotic to Anthony over the years, Fantano still shows reserves of care toward his old friend, albeit affections laced with ambivalent tolerance of Cichesta's love of all things Rebecca Black. Returning from his musical hiatus, Fantano began his blog The Needle Drop in 2007. This resulted in widespread outrage from a number of his old fans, who labeled him a sellout and a chia pet fedora-wearing scrub lord, among other things. The cries of his harshest critics were quickly silenced when Fantano released Slipknot Track Review on December 16, 2009, a definitive, forward-thinking masterpiece of surrealist criticism that Adult Swim wouldn't have been able to conceive of in their heyday of rich experimentalism. The accolades began to resurge for Anthony once again, with many considering Slipknot Track Review a pinnacle staple in his career. In 2010, Fanny won the Golden Globe for Best Supporting Music Nerd in an animated series out of sheer respect, in spite of his ineligibility and the non-existence of the category beforehand. He also received the Pulitzer Prize in crocheting for his controversial coverage of the My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy and Weekend trilogy riots that ensued over his subsequent reviews of those projects. Though his career as the Needle Drop continued to astound and impress his peers, in 2014 an incident threatened to derail his fame and possibly destroy the world. At South by Southwest, Fantano ran into his lifelong idol, Stefan Burnett of MXLPX and Death Grips, a less commonly associated act. The two engaged in lively conversation, finding each other to be kindred spirits. Soon after, the two were tragically interrupted by Michael Gira of Swans. He lunged at Burnett, wielding an Irish shara, crying, "There can be only one 10." An epic battle ensued. The music festival was trapped in chaotic warfare for days. Sun Kill Moon and the Nines formed a temporary allegiance with the War on Drugs and the Sevens. Daft Punks of the Eights famously betrayed their armistice with the Fours to gain power over the 60s. To gain power over the Six's brief reign. The battle reached a climactic scene as MC Ride and Chira bellowed their trademark howls at each other in an immense surge of power that collided and caused a massive explosion, wiping out most of the headliners that were completely overshadowed by the battle at hand. Stefan emerged from the rubble having subdued Gira, fatally wounded. As Anthony held the dying MC in his arms, Burnett whispered, "It gets so fucking dark in here. Don't come apart in here," Fantano cried. If you die in the process, I die in the process. Ride smiled and comforted Anthony with a soft-spoken and abrasive fuck. I said, fucker, don't start shit. As he released his final breath, spread eagle across the festival grounds, Fantano cried out to the heavens in agony. Death Grips was no more. The balance of power now in check, Fantano returned home, more or less unfazed by the whole event. He would later give the concert a light to decent 6, his consensus reading, where the climax was emotionally satisfying. I admire the ambition on display. The majority of the midsection of the battle was too lo-fi and repetitive for my tastes. And the whole thing reeked of a hurried production to accommodate South by Southwest fan demands. Today, Fantano's career has settled into a steady groove. His fan base grows ever larger with the creation of the Church of A$AP Ferg, of which Fantano is a recurring pew speaker. He lives with his wife, Annie Clark, and his 7 children, Mick, Michael, Michelle with 2 L's, Michelle with 1 L, Michael Jr., Travis, and Anthony Jr., his oldest daughter. Anthony and Cal's Most Magical Christmas of All by Josh B. Oh God, it was Christmas morning, and Anthony Fantano was standing before the largest pile of presents he had ever received. Now, in any other situation, this would be a wonderful surprise. But in this situation, it filled Anthony with nothing but dread. He looked at the tall boxes, bound in colorful paper and silk bows, and wondered what could possibly be inside them. They almost filled the room with their size, and in fact the only thing that towered above these gargantuan gifts was the Christmas tree itself, topped with a mason jar. What was it, then, that made Fantano so wary of the packages that lay before him? It was, of course, the identity of the generous individual who had purchased, boxed, and wrapped these gifts, the roommate from Purgatory, Cal Chuchesta. "Merry Christmas, Anthony," sang Cal, leaping out from behind one of the presents in a disgustingly tight Christmas-themed turtleneck. Panting, he looked around the room proudly and shuffled over to where Anthony was standing. "What the hell is this?" asked Fantano, taking his glasses off so he could bury his face in his palm. "What do you mean?" "It's your Christmas presents," said Cal. "Go ahead and open 'em up." Reluctantly, Anthony stepped up to the first gift. It was about 5 feet tall, the same across, wrapped in a repeating pattern of smiling snowmen. As he began to rip the paper away, he suddenly felt the box move. He recoiled and slowly turned back to Cal, who gave an encouraging nod. Anthony turned back to the box. Perhaps Cal had bought him another puppy for Christmas. Maybe that wasn't such a bad gift after all. Excitedly now, Anthony ripped the paper away to reveal the box underneath. He grabbed the top of the box and threw it open, only to be knocked back as a large white shape leapt at him from inside. Anthony stumbled backwards, landing on the couch with a yell. The white shape flew around the room, knocking over the tree and cracking a mirror. "What the hell?" screamed Anthony. "Is that what I think it is?" "A swan. You love the swans." The large, angry bird spiraled into the kitchen, followed by the sounds of pots and pans clanging against the floor, the dishes smashing beside them. Pulling a white feather from his controversial new hairstyle, Anthony looked at Cal in disbelief. "The band swans, you unbelievable moron." He jumped to his feet, clenching his fists in rage. Cal looked confused. He scratched his head and then simply shrugged. "Whoopsie," Fantano sighed. "Besides, that's only one swan." There were 2 in the box." Hesitantly, Anthony stepped over to the open box once more and peeked over the edge. "Oh, gross. Poor thing," he groaned. Picking up the box, he shoved it at Cal. "Get rid of that, and while you're at it, get rid of the one that's still alive before it breaks everything we have." Cal ashamedly took the box and retreated into the kitchen. Anthony stood with his hands on his hips and shook his head as he listened to Cal Chuchesta cry out in pain, trying to wrestle the angry creature outside. After a few minutes, Cal came back into the room, covered in scratches with tears in his eyes. "Are any of these other presents going to attack us?" "Are any of these other presents going to attack us?" asked a perturbed Fantano. No, whimpered Cal. "Let's get this over with, then." Anthony picked up a smaller box, at least compared to the others. This was surprisingly heavy. He shook it, and it made a strange sound. Glaring at Cal suspiciously, he unwrapped the paper and opened it up. He stared into the box for a long time, and then looked back at Cal, and then back into the box, and then back at Cal. "What," he eventually sighed, "is the matter with you? What is this?" Anthony reached into the present and grabbed a handful of what was inside. Pulling it out, he opened his fist to reveal a clump of dark, moist soil. "Earth," beamed Cal. "I heard you making one of your YouTube videos, and you said you liked Earth. So I went outside and got some good fertile earth, just for you." As chunks of dirt fell out of his hand, Anthony looked around the room at the oddly sized shaped packages and began to realize just what was going on. He tipped his head back, whispering to himself about just how much he hated Cal. So much. And so it went. For the rest of the morning, Anthony opened gift after gift to find the misinterpretation. A knife, a framed picture of the sun, some wire, a vise with a little skull and some crossbones crudely etched on, some fireworks, which stumped Fantano at first, but made sense when Cal explained that they could be used to create some of those explosions in the sky he loves so much. Finally, Anthony came to the last gift. Tired from sighing and yelling, he tore the paper weakly and opened up the package. To say that he smiled might be a slight exaggeration, but the frown certainly dropped from his face. He took out the object inside and lay it down on the rug in front of him. It was an LCD sound system. Of course, this had been another error in understanding by Cal, but Fantano paused and began to nod slowly. He was checking out the box, and after a second, stood up and turned to look at his roommate. "You know, even though I know this was a mistake, and that you're still a ridiculous brain-dead excuse for a human being, this is actually not bad." Really? "Yeah, it's actually a pretty decent sound system. I think I might get a kick out of it." "Gee, well, you're welcome, buddy. Happy Christmas." "You know what, man? It's Christmas. You've done well on this last thing. I'm feeling a light hug on this one." To Cal's surprise, Anthony stretched out his arms and embraced him. Cal was overcome with joy and held Anthony tight. By the light of the Christmas tree lights, they stood together, surrounded by Cal's strange gifts, and shared that moment. "So what did you get me?" asked Cal. Anthony laughed. "Nothing, obviously. I hate you."